The city was alive with its usual evening bustle. The sidewalks were filled with the sounds of hurried footsteps, the hum of distant conversations, and the faint whir of passing cars. It was a scene many had seen countless times. The kind of day where nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. But on this particular day, something different, something shocking, was about to unfold. At the corner of Maple Street, an elderly woman, barely 5 feet tall, was struggling. She wasn't just fighting the wind that tousled her silver hair or the weight of her bags, but the force of something far more brutal. A police officer had pushed her. Not out of necessity or self-defense, but with the kind of force that didn't belong in a community of peace. She stumbled backward, her frail body hitting the cold concrete with a sickening thud. The crowd around them began to stir. A few people gasped. Some whipped out their phones, as if the scene was something they could consume, share, and forget. A couple of bystanders shouted, "What are you doing?" but their voices were drowned by the officer's commands. His voice was sharp, filled with authority, but not with empathy. "Move along. There's nothing to see here," the officer barked, his boots digging into the pavement as he stood over the woman. But the woman wasn't moving. She was lying there, clutching her side, trying to push herself up with trembling hands. Her face was a mix of pain and confusion, as though she couldn't understand why this was happening to her. She had done nothing wrong. She hadn't been a part of any crime. She had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her breath was shallow. Her fingers trembled, reaching out for anything to hold on to. The officer, still standing over her, seemed oblivious to the human being lying in front of him. He wasn't concerned about her welfare. He wasn't offering a hand to help her up. Instead, he just stood there, almost as if daring anyone to challenge his authority. But then came the sound that no one expected. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, cutting through the noise of the crowd. "Get off her." The voice was unmistakable. It was a roar, deep and powerful, carrying a sense of urgency that no one could ignore. It belonged to none other than Mike Tyson, the legendary boxer who had once ruled the ring with an iron fist. But this wasn't the ring. This wasn't some staged fight. This was real life, and Tyson's words were filled with the kind of gravity that only someone with his history could bring. The crowd parted. Tyson, dressed in a black hoodie and sweatpants, strode forward with purpose. His face was serious, a far cry from the playful persona some remembered. His eyes locked onto the officer, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The officer, caught off guard, took a step back. He wasn't expecting this. Who would expect a world champion boxer to intervene in a street altercation? But Tyson didn't hesitate. He didn't back down. His eyes, usually known for their ferocity in the ring, now carried something deeper, an unwavering sense of justice. "Are you out of your damn mind?" Tyson demanded, his voice sharp and unyielding. The officer hesitated, looking around at the crowd, unsure of how to handle the situation. His hand twitched toward his baton, but Tyson was already one step ahead. He stepped closer, standing between the officer and the woman, like a human wall. "Get her up," Tyson said, his voice calm but powerful. "She's not a criminal. She doesn't deserve this." There was a tense silence. The officer's face reddened. His pride was bruised. He wasn't used to being questioned in public, especially by someone with Tyson's stature. He glanced around, seeing the eyes of the crowd fixed on him. It wasn't a good look. He had to act fast. "What's your problem, man?" "Stay out of this," the officer growled, his hand now gripping the baton. But Tyson didn't flinch. He stood his ground. The crowd held its collective breath. No one knew what was going to happen next, but everyone knew this moment would change everything. "You don't get it, do you?" Tyson said, his voice now softer but no less intense. "You're not just a cop, you're a person too. And what you just did? That wasn't right. The officer's face twitched. The crowd was growing louder now, murmurs spreading like wildfire. People were filming. They were commenting. The moment had become too big to ignore. "Help her up," Tyson said again, this time softer. His voice had an unexpected calm, almost like he was speaking to a child who had lost their way. The officer, defeated by the weight of public pressure, finally stepped back. He didn't speak a word. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving behind the chaos he had started. Tyson knelt down beside the elderly woman, his hands gentle as he helped her up. She was trembling, but she didn't seem to be badly hurt. Her eyes, filled with fear, met his. There was a moment of silence between them, a moment that carried more weight than words ever could. "Are you all right?" Tyson asked, his voice softening further. The woman nodded, though she was still shaken. I don't know what happened," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's okay," Tyson reassured her. "You're safe now." As Tyson helped her to the sidewalk, the crowd slowly began to disperse, but the energy remained electric. People were still talking, still reeling from what they had just witnessed. Some were in disbelief, others in awe. Tyson wasn't just a boxer in that moment, he was something more. He was a symbol of standing up for what's right, even when it's inconvenient. Even when it's unexpected. But as the scene began to fade, one question lingered in the air: why had Tyson been there? What had drawn him to this particular spot on this particular day? As the crowd slowly dissipated, a police car pulled up to the scene, its sirens flashing. The officer who had shoved the woman was inside, his face twisted in frustration. He stepped out of the car, looking around at the crowd. His eyes settled on Tyson, who was standing a few feet away with the elderly woman at his side. The officer's hand moved instinctively toward his radio. He wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to let a celebrity get away with embarrassing him in front of the public. But before he could make a move, Tyson looked up at him, locking eyes with the officer in a way that sent a chill through the air. The officer hesitated. His finger hovered over the radio button, but he didn't press it. The standoff lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Tyson's presence was undeniable. There was power in standing up for what's right, in using one's platform for good. "Take care of her," Tyson said softly to the officer, his voice now steady and calm. "And next time, think before you act." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the officer to process what had just happened. The crowd slowly scattered, and the scene faded into the background noise of the city. But the memory of it would stay with them. The question on everyone's mind remained: what had driven Mike Tyson to intervene? Was it just chance? Or was there something deeper at play here? Something that none of them could yet understand? As Tyson disappeared into the night, one thing was certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. It was just another night in the city, or so it seemed. The streets, once filled with the aftermath of chaos, had returned to their normal hum. People were back to their routines, cars honked in the distance, and the city lights twinkled like a million tiny stars, unaware of the drama that had unfolded only hours before. But for some, the events earlier in the day were far from forgotten. Mike Tyson's actions had been the talk of the town. Everywhere you went, someone was discussing the incident. Some praised him for stepping in. Others whispered about why he had even been there in the first place. But one thing was certain: the world had seen a side of Tyson that few people ever expected. The world knew him as a boxer, a champion with an infamous history. But now, he was a protector. He was a man who stood up for the innocent, even in the face of danger. But why? It didn't take long for the news to reach places beyond the city limits. What was a local event quickly became national news. Reporters began digging for answers. Who was the elderly woman? What happened to her after Tyson left the scene? Why was the officer so aggressive? And most importantly, why did Tyson intervene? Tyson, however, wasn't one to speak out often. He kept his thoughts to himself. But as the hours turned into days, and the questions kept coming, he knew that his silence wouldn't last forever. It couldn't. Back in his small apartment, Tyson sat alone, staring at the television. The news station was running a clip from the incident, replaying it over and over, as if the world needed to witness that moment repeatedly. He saw himself, his voice, his stance, his confrontation with the officer. It was surreal. He never imagined his name would be associated with something like this. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of the situation. It wasn't just the public attention, it was the feeling that something more was at play. Something he couldn't explain. The woman, her face, her trembling hands, the way she looked at him. It all felt too real, too intense. There was something he hadn't told anyone, something he couldn't shake. But he knew one thing for sure, his involvement was no accident. The phone on his coffee table buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. He picked it up, and the name that flashed on the screen made his heart skip a beat. Marie. She was the reporter who had been covering the incident. Tyson had met her years ago during one of his public appearances. She was smart, persistent, and kind-hearted. But there was something about her voice on the other end of the line that made him pause. "Mike," Marie said softly, "I need to talk to you. It's about the woman." Tyson sat up straighter. "What about her?" "Her name is Gloria. She's in the hospital." "She's okay, but," Marie's voice trailed off. "But what?" Tyson asked, his heart racing. Marie sighed. "There's something strange going on. Gloria hasn't been telling the whole truth about what happened. And she's scared. She refuses to talk to the police, refuses to answer their questions. She keeps repeating one thing: I didn't do it. I didn't mean to." Tyson's stomach turned. What was Gloria hiding? Why was she so afraid? And why hadn't she been more forthcoming with the authorities? "I'll come to see her," Tyson said, his voice determined. "Where is she?" Marie gave him the name of the hospital, and within minutes, Tyson was out the door, heading toward the unknown. The hospital was quiet when Tyson arrived. The usual hum of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses filled the sterile air. He checked in at the front desk and was quickly directed to Gloria's room. As he walked down the hallway, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He had been in his fair share of dangerous situations before, inside the ring and outside of it. But this felt different. The air was thick with something he couldn't quite explain. When he reached her room, he hesitated. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, he could see Gloria sitting on the edge of the bed. Her back was hunched, her hands folded in her lap, and she was staring at the floor as if deep in thought. She didn't look like someone who had been violently shoved to the ground. She looked like someone carrying a heavy secret, a burden that weighed her down. He knocked gently on the doorframe. Gloria's head snapped up, her eyes wide in surprise. Her face was pale, but there was a flicker of recognition in her gaze. She knew who he was. Of course, she did. Everyone knew who Mike Tyson was. "You came," Gloria whispered, her voice shaky. "I couldn't leave it like that," Tyson replied softly, stepping inside the room. "How are you feeling?" She shook her head. "Physically, I'll be fine. But, mentally, it's all so blurry." Tyson sat down in the chair next to her bed, trying to remain calm. But his mind was racing. There was more to this story than he was being told, and it was starting to feel like he was walking into something much darker than he had imagined. "I know you're scared," Tyson said gently. "But you don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere until we figure this out." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't do it," she said in a whisper, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I didn't mean to. Gloria, what happened? Tyson asked, his voice firm now. What did you do? Her hands began to shake, and she looked away. I was at the park that day. I was walking, just like I always do. I saw the officer talking to someone, but I didn't know what was going on. And then I heard a commotion. There was a fight. The officer was yelling. He grabbed a man who was in the middle of it. He didn't look like he was doing anything wrong, but the officer was angry. And then, I don't know why, but I just screamed. I screamed at the officer, told him to stop. Tyson's brow furrowed. And then I saw him coming toward me, Gloria continued, her voice trembling. I don't remember much after that. He shoved me to the ground, and then everything went black. The next thing I remember was you, standing over me. Tyson's heart sank. What Gloria was describing wasn't just an ordinary case of police overreach. It was something more. Someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes, and he had no idea how deep it went. I think there's more to this, Gloria, Tyson said. I think you're in danger. You need to tell me everything. Who was the man you were shouting at? Her eyes went wide, and she shook her head furiously. I can't. I don't know who he was. But he was important. I could tell. He's someone powerful. Tyson leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. You have to trust me. I'll protect you. But I need you to be honest. If we're going to figure this out, we have to start with the truth. Gloria's face went pale. She looked as though she was about to break. But before she could say another word, the door to the room slammed open. 2 officers stepped inside. Their presence was unmistakable. One was the same officer who had been involved in the earlier altercation. His eyes locked onto Tyson, his jaw tightening. The other officer, a taller man with cold eyes, stood behind him, looking as if he was ready for a confrontation. Mike Tyson, the officer sneered. What are you doing here? Tyson stood up slowly, his muscles tense, his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. I'm here to help Gloria. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to have a private conversation with her. The officer didn't move. His gaze was fixed on Gloria, who had gone quiet, her face pale and terrified. She's under our protection now, the officer said, his voice icy. And we suggest you leave. Tyson's heart raced. The stakes had just been raised. There was something more going on here than he had imagined. And he was about to find out exactly how deep the rabbit hole went. The officers stood in the doorway like 2 stone statues, their eyes trained on Mike Tyson, making it clear that any resistance would be met with force. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Gloria, still trembling on the hospital bed, didn't speak. She didn't even look up. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, her hands nervously wringing the hospital blanket. Mike Tyson's gaze remained locked on the officers. He knew the situation had escalated, but he wasn't backing down. There was too much at stake. Gloria had just started to reveal something important, something crucial. Tyson could feel it in his gut. He couldn't let the officers silence her. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. You think you can just barge in here and intimidate her? Tyson asked, his voice low but firm. He wasn't used to backing down from a challenge, and today wouldn't be the exception. His years in the ring had taught him how to read people. He could see that these officers weren't here to protect Gloria. They were here to control the narrative. One of the officers, the taller one with cold eyes, spoke first. Mike Tyson, I'm asking you to leave. Now. You've done enough damage. Tyson stood his ground, unfazed. I don't take orders from you, he said, his voice steady. If you want her to talk, you'll give her the space she needs. Let her speak the truth. The officer's eyes flashed with anger. This is a police matter. Not your business. Tyson didn't flinch. The way I see it, Gloria's been through enough. If she's in danger, I'm making it my business. The silence stretched between them, a tense standoff that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, the officer took a step toward the bed, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at Gloria. You're making a big mistake, Mike. We'll make sure you regret this. Mike Tyson's heart raced. His instincts were telling him something was off. The officer wasn't just trying to shut him down, he was threatening him. Threatening Gloria. And that was something Tyson wasn't about to let slide. I'm not afraid of you, Tyson said, his voice unwavering. But I'll make sure Gloria gets the help she needs. The officer's gaze shifted to his partner, who stood in the background, a silent observer to the exchange. After a moment of hesitation, the officer in the front stepped back, a silent challenge in his eyes. This isn't over, Tyson, he muttered, turning on his heel and marching out of the room. As the door slammed behind them, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. Mike Tyson let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He turned back to Gloria, who was still sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale with fear. Gloria looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and worry. They're not going to stop, are they? Tyson shook his head. No, Gloria. They're not. But that doesn't mean we stop either. You've got a story to tell, and I'm here to help you tell it. She swallowed hard. I don't know if I can. It's too dangerous. Tyson leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. You don't have to do this alone. We'll figure it out together. Gloria's hands shook as she grasped the edges of the blanket. She hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak or not. Then, with a deep breath, she began. I never wanted any of this, she whispered. I never wanted to be part of something so dangerous. Tyson sat silently, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. I told you about the officer, Gloria continued. The one I screamed at. I didn't know who he was, but he wasn't like the others. He had a presence. Something about him made me think he wasn't just some regular cop. There was something darker about him. Tyson nodded, urging her to go on. I was just in the park, you know, minding my business. I saw the officer, and I thought he was just doing his job, but then something happened. He started shouting at a man, someone I'd never seen before. The man was smaller than the officer, looked like he was just trying to walk away. But the officer kept following him, getting more aggressive. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. So I yelled at him to stop. I don't know why I did it. It just came out. Tyson felt a knot form in his stomach. Something about this was off, something didn't add up. And then? Then he turned toward me. His eyes, they were filled with something I've never seen before. It was like he wanted to hurt me, like he wanted to punish me for interfering. He grabbed me, and that's when everything went black. Gloria stopped, as if the memory was too painful to relive. Tyson leaned in closer, his voice soft. Gloria, what are you hiding? What aren't you telling me? Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. I didn't do anything wrong. I swear, I didn't. But I think the officer. I think he was there for a reason. I heard him talking to someone on the phone earlier. It was a brief conversation, but he mentioned something about the package. Tyson's mind raced. What package? Gloria shook her head. I don't know. I couldn't hear much of the conversation, but it didn't sound like it was about a normal arrest. The way he spoke, it wasn't like he was just dealing with a suspect. It was more like he was answering to someone. Tyson's heart skipped a beat. The officer had mentioned the package. That sounded too familiar. Something was going on here. Something much bigger than just a simple police encounter. Before Tyson could ask any more questions, the door to the room creaked open again. This time, it wasn't the officers, it was someone else. A man in a dark suit, with a face that seemed to be carved from stone, stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had an air of authority that was almost suffocating. "I'm sorry, am I interrupting something?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Tyson stood up, his instincts immediately on high alert. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he took a step toward Gloria's bed, his eyes flicking briefly toward Tyson before settling on Gloria. "I'm here to make sure that everything goes smoothly. I understand you've been having some complications." Gloria's face went white. She recoiled slightly as the man moved closer. Tyson could feel the tension building again. He wasn't sure who this man was, but he didn't trust him. Not one bit. "Stay away from her," Tyson growled, stepping between the man and Gloria. The man smiled thinly, almost as if Tyson's threat didn't even register. "You don't want to make this difficult, Mr. Tyson," he said quietly. "You have no idea what's at stake here." Tyson's fists clenched at his sides. "You don't scare me." "I'm not trying to," the man replied, his tone still smooth. "But I should warn you, you're in over your head. All of you are." Tyson's blood ran cold. He'd been in a lot of situations where the stakes were high, but this felt different. This wasn't just about protecting Gloria anymore. This was about something much bigger. And Tyson had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went. Before Tyson could respond, the man turned and walked out of the room, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. Tyson stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Gloria was visibly shaken. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she clutched the blanket tightly in her hands. "Who was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tyson didn't answer right away. He couldn't. There were too many questions, too many unknowns. But one thing was clear, the people behind this were not going to stop. And now, neither was he. The silence in the hospital room felt oppressive. The events of the past few hours weighed heavily on Mike Tyson. His muscles ached from the tension, his thoughts a jumbled mess of suspicion and concern. Who was the man in the suit? Why did he speak with such authority, as if he knew everything? And what was his connection to the officers? Tyson looked down at Gloria, who still sat on the bed, staring at the floor with wide eyes. She looked terrified, more terrified than he'd ever seen her before. The door had barely closed behind the man in the suit when Tyson turned back to Gloria. What did he mean by that? "You're in over your head," Tyson asked. "Who is he? What's going on here?" Gloria shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't know. I don't know who he is, but I've seen people like him before. People who are involved in things that they don't want anyone to know about." Tyson stepped closer, his voice calm but urgent. "Gloria, I need you to think. Whatever you know, whatever you can remember, tell me." She looked up at him, her face pale. "I wish I could. But I don't have the full picture. All I know is that he's dangerous. Whoever he is, he's not someone you can just confront. He's part of something bigger. Something that's been going on for a long time." Tyson clenched his fists, frustration building inside him. He had come here to protect Gloria, to make sure that she wasn't just another victim in a long line of corrupt schemes. But now, it seemed like they were both caught in something far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. "Tell me everything you remember about that phone call. What did you hear?" Tyson pressed, his voice growing more insistent. Gloria swallowed hard, her eyes flicking to the floor as if she was trying to gather the courage to speak. "I was close enough to hear the officer talking to someone. I think it was a woman on the other end of the line. Her voice sounded distant, but she said something that stuck with me. What did she say? Tyson asked, his pulse quickening. She said, the package is ready for transport. Do whatever it takes to keep the investigation clean. I don't know what that means, but it didn't sound good. Tyson's mind raced. A package? What could it be? And why was it so important that it had to be kept clean? His thoughts began to spiral out of control. This was no ordinary police case. This was something far deeper, something that reached beyond the local precinct. As Tyson tried to make sense of it all, Gloria's voice broke through his thoughts. Mike, I think they've been following me. I think they've been watching me for a while. I don't know why, but I've been getting these strange calls. Anonymous ones. I thought it was just a prank at first, but now, I don't know. Tyson felt his stomach tighten. This was getting worse. It wasn't just an isolated incident, they had been watching her. And whoever was behind this had clearly made Gloria a target. Did you ever speak to them? Tyson asked, his voice softening. Gloria nodded slowly. Once. I answered a call, and it was someone on the other end, a man. He didn't say his name, but he told me to stop asking questions. He said if I didn't, there would be consequences. He was very calm about it. Like it wasn't the first time he'd done this. Tyson's heart sank. He had seen this kind of intimidation before, but it never felt this personal. Whoever was behind this wasn't just after information. They were sending a message. They'll hurt you, Gloria. They won't stop until they get what they want, Tyson said quietly. His protective instincts flared. He had to find out more, had to learn who was behind this and why they were willing to go so far to silence Gloria. Before Tyson could say anything else, a sharp knock sounded at the door. His hand instinctively went to his side, where he kept a small handgun. But he didn't pull it out. Not yet. Mike, please, Gloria whispered, her voice trembling. If they've found me here, it's over. I can't. Calm down, Tyson interrupted, his voice steady. Whoever it is, they're not getting in without a fight. The door creaked open, and two men in suits stepped into the room. The first man, the one in front, was tall, with a stern face that could belong to a statue. The second was shorter, his eyes constantly darting around the room, as if expecting someone to jump out at him. Tyson didn't move, his eyes locked on the first man. Can I help you? The man in the front gave a tight-lipped smile. Mr. Tyson, we need to speak with Miss Gloria. It's imperative. Tyson narrowed his eyes. He knew exactly who these men were. They weren't here for a friendly conversation. And they definitely weren't here to protect Gloria. You'll speak to her through me, Tyson said, his voice hardening. What do you want? The man's smile didn't falter, but there was something cold in his eyes. We want her cooperation. That's all. If she cooperates, there will be no further trouble. Tyson stepped forward, his body blocking the doorway. I don't think you understand. No one's going near Gloria unless they're willing to talk to me first. So, let's make this clear. Who are you working for? The man's gaze shifted briefly to his companion, who was still standing by the door. After a tense moment, the man spoke. You really want to know, Mr. Tyson? Do you really want to know who we work for? Tyson's chest tightened, but he didn't back down. He didn't care who these men worked for. He wasn't going to let them take Gloria. Not now, not ever. Yes, Tyson replied evenly. I do. The man's smile finally disappeared, replaced by a look of cold calculation. You really don't understand the gravity of the situation, do you? There are people who've been watching this whole situation unfold. People who don't take kindly to interruptions. And believe me, Mr. Tyson, you don't want to cross them. Tyson's pulse raced. The man wasn't just making empty threats. He was warning him. And it was clear that whoever was behind this had a lot of power. "I'm not scared of your threats," Tyson shot back. "But if you touch her, I'll make sure you regret it." The man's expression never changed. "You're already in over your head, Tyson. But we'll see how long you can keep that up." With that, the two men turned and walked out, leaving the room as silently as they'd entered. Tyson stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. He turned to Gloria, who had been watching the exchange with wide, frightened eyes. "Gloria, we need to get you out of here," he said urgently. "They're not going to stop. Whoever these people are, they're not playing by the rules. And if you don't tell me everything you know, I can't protect you." Gloria looked at him, her face pale and drawn. She didn't speak immediately, as though she was considering her next words carefully. Finally, she whispered, "Mike. I think I know who's behind this." Tyson's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" he demanded. Gloria swallowed hard before speaking again, her voice barely audible. "The people in charge of all of this, they're part of a network. A network of powerful people who control everything from the shadows. They've been using the police, the media, anyone they can to keep everything under wraps. And I think they've been using me to cover up something much bigger. Something I don't even understand." Tyson's mind was racing. This was bigger than a simple case of corruption. It was part of something much darker. And now, Gloria had become a pawn in a dangerous game. "You need to tell me everything, Gloria," Tyson urged, his voice filled with urgency. "Everything. No more secrets." She took a deep breath and nodded, ready to finally reveal the truth. The dim light of the late evening filtered through the blinds of the hotel room, casting long shadows on the walls. Mike Tyson stood near the window, his arms folded across his chest, staring out into the empty street below. His mind raced, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and suspicion. The deeper he dug into this, the more dangerous it became. The threats had escalated. The mystery surrounding Gloria was unfolding, but with every answer came even more questions. He turned away from the window and looked at her. She sat on the edge of the bed, still looking fragile, but now, a faint glimmer of defiance was beginning to shine through her eyes. The tension in the room was palpable. Tyson could feel it in the air, the weight of what was to come. Gloria had just confessed that she knew more than she had let on, and the pieces were finally starting to fall into place. Tyson was about to hear the full story, but he could see the hesitation in her eyes. This wasn't easy for her. But it had to come out. "Gloria," Tyson said, his voice low but firm. "You said you know who's behind this. Who's been pulling the strings? I need you to tell me everything. No more hiding. No more running." She looked up at him, her face pale but resolved. "I don't want to put you in danger, Mike. But, you have a right to know. You've been dragged into this whether you want to be or not. I owe you the truth." Tyson's jaw clenched. He wasn't afraid. He had already faced down bigger threats, but this? This was different. This was personal. Gloria had become more than just someone he was trying to protect. She had become a part of his life, and he wasn't about to let anything happen to her. "Tell me," he urged, his voice tight with intensity. Gloria took a shaky breath. I was just doing my job. I didn't ask questions at first. But the more I learned, the more I started to understand what was really happening." She paused, gathering her thoughts as if weighing the consequences of every word. "I worked as an administrative assistant for a private security firm. We dealt with all sorts of clients, government contracts, high-profile protection, stuff that's usually confidential. But then, there were a few assignments that seemed off. Some clients were too secretive. I didn't know what was going on at first. But after a while, I started connecting the dots. Tyson leaned forward, his attention fixed on her. What kind of dots? Gloria looked away, her eyes clouded with a mixture of fear and regret. The firm, it was more than just a security company. They were involved in something illegal, something that went way beyond what I could have imagined. I started getting calls, strange ones, asking me to handle sensitive documents, surveillance reports, things I wasn't supposed to see. But I did. She bit her lip, eyes scanning the floor as she relived the memories. It wasn't just about protecting the rich or the powerful. It was about covering up things that should never have been hidden. Corruption. Blackmail. And worst of all, they were dealing with people who weren't even supposed to exist. People like the ones who came after me. People who work in the shadows, pulling the strings, controlling everything from behind the scenes. Tyson's blood ran cold. What are you saying, Gloria? Who are these people? What are they after? I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think they've been tracking me. I think they know everything about me. They've been watching, waiting for me to slip up. And now that I know too much, they won't stop until they silence me. The room felt suffocating. Tyson could feel the weight of the situation crashing down on him. Gloria was caught in something much bigger than either of them had anticipated. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The people behind this were ruthless. They didn't just want to silence Gloria. They wanted to erase everything. I'm not going to let them take you, Gloria, Tyson said, his voice steady but filled with determination. We're getting out of here. We're going to the authorities. We're going to expose them. She shook her head, her face filled with regret. You don't understand, Mike. The authorities are part of it. They've been involved in this from the start. The people in charge have eyes everywhere. They control everything, the police, the media, even the politicians. If you go to them, they'll turn you away, or worse, they'll come for you. Tyson's eyes narrowed. He had suspected as much, but hearing it from Gloria made it all the more real. The corruption ran deep. It wasn't just a few bad cops or a handful of criminals, it was an entire network, an organized system that had its claws in every part of society. Then we go to someone who isn't part of their system, Tyson said. We find a way to bring them down. I won't stop until I've found out who's behind this. Gloria hesitated, then looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. Mike, they'll kill us. They'll make it look like an accident. Or worse, they'll make it seem like we're the ones who are guilty. Tyson stood up straight, his posture unwavering. Let them try. We'll fight back. We're not going down without a fight. Before Gloria could respond, there was a sudden knock at the door. Tyson's heart skipped a beat. His instincts flared, he was on high alert. He moved quickly, stepping in front of Gloria, positioning himself between her and the door. He wasn't taking any chances. Mike, please, Gloria whispered, her voice trembling. If it's them. It's not them, Tyson replied firmly, his eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. Just stay quiet. Let me handle this. Another knock came, louder this time. Tyson approached the door cautiously, his hand hovering near his waistband where he kept a small handgun. He wasn't expecting a fight, but he was ready for it. He opened the door just a crack, peering out into the hallway. His gaze locked with a man in a suit, tall, thin, and wearing dark sunglasses despite the dim lighting of the hotel. The man was holding a briefcase, his posture rigid, almost too perfect. Can I help you? Tyson asked, his voice cool. The man didn't smile, but there was a certain calmness in his demeanor that made Tyson's skin crawl. Mr. Tyson, the man said in a low, controlled voice. I believe we need to have a discussion. Tyson didn't move, didn't let his guard down. He knew this wasn't a friendly visit. I'm listening, he replied. The man glanced over his shoulder before stepping closer, lowering his voice so that only Tyson could hear. "You're meddling in something you don't understand. The people you're dealing with are not to be trifled with. If you want to leave this place alive, you'll leave now. You'll forget everything." Tyson's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening around the door handle. "You're making a mistake, buddy. I'm not backing down." The man didn't flinch. "Then prepare yourself, Mr. Tyson. Because they're coming for you. And when they do, it won't be just you they come for. It'll be everyone you care about." Tyson's blood ran cold. He didn't need the man to say more. He knew exactly who they were. This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. They weren't just after Gloria. They were after him, too. The man straightened, as if he'd said everything he needed to. "You've been warned," he said, turning to leave. Tyson didn't hesitate. He slammed the door shut, locking it quickly. His mind was racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it. The game had officially begun. And he was going to fight until the very end. He turned to Gloria, his eyes filled with resolve. "We're not running anymore. We're going after them." Gloria looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and gratitude. "You don't know what you're up against, Mike. You don't know what they'll do." Tyson nodded, his voice unwavering. "I don't care what they do. They've made it personal now." The air was thick with tension. Every corner of the small, dimly lit hotel room seemed to close in on Mike Tyson and Gloria. For a moment, all he could hear was his own heartbeat, a constant thrum in his ears. But he couldn't let fear control him. He had a job to do, and there was no turning back now. "Mike, what are we going to do?" Gloria's voice trembled, but it was laced with a resolve she hadn't had earlier. She had seen it in his eyes, the determination to not back down, no matter the cost. Tyson stood tall, his posture unyielding. He had made up his mind. No more running. No more hiding. He wasn't just protecting Gloria anymore, he was exposing the truth, whatever it took. The man who had warned him earlier, the one who had come to his door, had made it clear that the people they were up against didn't play fair. But Tyson wasn't intimidated. He had faced threats before, but this time, there was more at stake. "We're going to the source," Tyson replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the anxiety that threatened to rise up inside him. "We'll find out who's behind this, and we're going to make them answer for everything they've done." Gloria stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "Mike, you don't understand. You can't just march into this, these people, they'll stop at nothing. We're not dealing with regular criminals. They have power. They have connections." Tyson shot her a look that softened just slightly. "I know. But I can't let you go through this alone. And I'm not about to let them destroy us." He wasn't exaggerating. He knew the people they were dealing with weren't just ordinary criminals. These were people who operated in the shadows, a powerful syndicate that had infiltrated every aspect of society. The danger was real, and they knew too much. Tyson didn't know exactly who they were or how far their influence stretched, but he knew they had the power to crush him and Gloria without a second thought. But Tyson wasn't someone who ran from danger. If they were going to take him down, they would have to do it face to face. The clock was ticking. They couldn't stay in the hotel any longer. Every second they spent there, the risk of being found increased exponentially. Gloria's face had gone pale with fear. But there was something else in her eyes now, determination. She didn't want to fight, but she had no choice. There was no turning back. It was either them, or the people who had been hunting them for weeks. Mike's phone rang, snapping them both out of their tense silence. The ringtone was low, but urgent, a reminder that time was slipping away. He picked up the phone, his heart rate accelerating slightly as he saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. "This is Mike Tyson," he answered quickly, trying to keep his voice calm. "Mr. Tyson," the voice on the other end of the line was clipped, professional, but there was something unmistakably cold about it. "We've been watching you. And we know you've been digging into things you shouldn't. You need to stop." Mike clenched his jaw. "Not a chance. I'm not going to stop until I find out who's behind this, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice returned, colder than ever. "You've made a mistake, Tyson. You don't know what you're dealing with. You don't understand how far this goes. You don't understand the consequences of your actions. If you continue, we'll make sure you regret it." Mike's blood ran cold. The threat was clear, but it wasn't enough to stop him. It only made him more determined. "I'm not afraid of you. I'll take my chances." With that, he ended the call, his hand shaking slightly as he set the phone down. The room fell silent once again. Gloria took a deep breath, looking at him with a mix of fear and respect. "You really think they'll stop at just threatening you? They'll come after you, Mike. After us both. I know. But if I don't do this now, I'll never forgive myself," Tyson replied, his voice strong. "We need to get to the bottom of this. I'm not running anymore. We have to face this head on." It didn't take long for Tyson to put a plan in motion. They couldn't trust anyone. The police, the media, and the people who controlled everything, they were all part of the same system. The only option left was to go underground, to find allies who hadn't been corrupted. They would need to find someone who could help them take down the entire network. But it wasn't going to be easy. Tyson knew that. But he wasn't one to back down from a challenge. They drove through the dark streets of the city, the headlights of their car illuminating the empty roads. Gloria sat in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning their surroundings, always alert, always cautious. She knew better than anyone what could happen next. But she also knew they were running out of time. They had to act fast, or they would be the ones buried under the weight of the conspiracy they had uncovered. Tyson didn't speak much during the drive. His mind was racing, piecing together everything he'd learned so far. There was one person who might have the answers they needed. A former associate of the private security firm Gloria had worked for. He had gone off the grid years ago, but Tyson knew someone who might still have contact with him. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. They arrived at an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The place looked desolate, a far cry from the gleaming buildings of the city's center. Tyson parked the car, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of danger. They didn't know who was watching. They didn't know if the people after them were already here, waiting for the right moment. "We go in together," Tyson said, glancing over at Gloria. She nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "Let's do this." They stepped out of the car, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. The building was eerily silent, the windows boarded up, and the front door locked. Tyson had expected as much. He had come prepared. He pulled out a crowbar from the trunk of the car, and with a few swift movements, the door creaked open. The inside was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. As they made their way deeper into the building, the silence seemed to grow heavier. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. But they didn't hesitate. They couldn't afford to. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the man Tyson had been hoping to find. His name was Evan, and he had been one of the top agents at the security firm Gloria had worked for. But something had happened, something that had caused him to turn his back on the life he had known. Now, he was a fugitive, hiding in the shadows like everyone else who had tried to expose the truth. "You made it," Evan said, his voice low and rough. "I didn't think anyone would come for me." Tyson stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "We don't have time for small talk. We need information. We need to know who's behind this. Who's pulling the strings? Evan hesitated, glancing over at Gloria before he spoke. It's bigger than you think. There's a network, a powerful one. It reaches all the way to the top. The people you've been chasing? They're only pawns in a much bigger game. You need to stop before it's too late. But Tyson wasn't ready to back down. Not now. I'm not stopping. Tell me everything. We're going to bring them down. Evan's face darkened. You don't understand, Tyson. They'll kill you. They'll kill everyone you love. Tyson's grip tightened. Then they'll have to try. The pieces were finally coming together. The enemy was closing in, but Tyson and Gloria were no longer running from it. They were fighting back. In the coming days, they would risk everything to expose the truth. But the final confrontation would test everything they had, every ounce of courage, every ounce of strength. The story was far from over.